Greetings and welcome to another episode of the TED in Your Head podcast. As you may know, I'm Ted Moreno, your friendly neighborhood certified clinical hypnotherapist and high performance coach. And for 21 years, I've been helping people with all kinds of different challenges, including self-sabotage. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Self-sabotage, identifying how you stop your success. Now, I want to mention that if you listen to this podcast and get the feeling that there's some self-sabotaging behaviors going on in your mind, I will tell you how to get in touch with me at the end of our show today. But for now, let's get into today's episode. So we're talking about self-sabotage. And what I mean is those behaviors that keep us from our goals and accomplishments. Now, I addressed this subject a couple of years ago, but recently I've had a number of people coming to me to work on this specific challenge. So I thought I would revisit it and add some more things to it, kind of update that podcast that I did on this subject a couple of years ago. So, self-sabotage is when we consciously or subconsciously stop ourselves from getting what we want. This could be due to things that we are doing, or it could be things that we're not doing. There's a lot of ways that we sabotage our success and happiness and accomplishments, and it can happen consciously or subconsciously. And that's really, really important because if our self-sabotage is conscious, in other words, we know that we're doing it, it's a little bit easier to address. But if it's subconscious, that means below conscious awareness. So we may not even know that we're doing it, and this makes it more difficult to identify and address. There's many reasons why we self-sabotage, consciously or subconsciously. Now, a lot of these may stem from childhood, especially if we had a dysfunctional childhood. Other reasons might be fear of success or failure, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, but definitely the biggest one is fear. It's important to understand that if you want to accomplish something and you haven't accomplished that thing before, and it requires behaviors and ways of thinking that you're not used to, it's a good bet that your subconscious mind is going to keep you from doing that thing because to your subconscious mind, it's unfamiliar and unknown. This is the basic tenet of subconscious reprogramming, is that your subconscious mind does not like what is unknown and unfamiliar. So all of these different self-sabotage behaviors are an attempt to keep us safe by keeping us away from things that are unknown. But of course, if we want to make changes or accomplish something, we have to get comfortable and familiar with the unknown. And most of the time, that's by actually jumping in and doing it. So you probably know that you are holding yourself back to some extent if you're not achieving what you know to be your potential. And if you realize that, you can do more and that there's some sense of holding yourself back, then it's safe to assume that there are self-sabotaging behaviors at work. Now, there's a lot of different behaviors. We're going to go through the most common ones. So as we go through these, make a mental checklist of which of these apply to you. There's an interesting article in Psychology Today that says that behavior is said to be self-sabotaging when it creates problems in daily life and interferes with long-standing goals. And if you want to go to a blog post of this podcast, and I'll tell you how to get to that, then you can click on the links and read some articles that I've put up there on my blog post. So the most common self-sabotaging behaviors include procrastination, self-medication with drugs or alcohol, comfort eating, and forms of self-injury, such as cutting and oftentimes illness. So let's break these down. I think probably the biggest reason that people sabotage their success is they don't feel they deserve success. So feeling not deserving. This would also include imposter syndrome, that sneaky feeling that you're faking it, and the fear that someone's going to discover that you're a fraud. If you have subconscious programming that you haven't worked hard enough, suffered enough, paid enough dues, or you've done things that you think you should not have, you've done things that you feel make you bad and that you should not have success or happiness, then your mind will do what it can to keep those things from you. I suggest you check out episode 426 of the Ted in the Head podcast titled What You Deserve Has Got Nothing to Do with It. Another thing that keeps people in self-sabotaging behaviors is focusing on what is not working or not right. So it's a feeling that there's always something wrong. Nothing ever works. Nothing ever goes right for me. You can't trust anybody. What's the point? So it is always being focused on the negative and complaining a lot. This is deadly, and it's a very sneaky way to not let yourself strive because nothing's going to work out anyway. This is toxic. This kind of stinking thinking is really bad for your success, health, and happiness. So if you recognize this in yourself, start to change that as quickly as possible. The next self-sabotage behavior is negative self-talk and extreme self-criticism. This is easy to see in ourselves, and it's pretty easy to see in others. But it's one of those self-sabotage behaviors that can become a really bad habit. Always tearing yourself down, beating yourself up. The more you do it, the worse you feel. The worse you feel, the more you do it. Nothing productive gets done. So if you're aware of that, recognize it's a bad habit and use positive affirmations. I'm a big fan of positive affirmations. Next, procrastination. We all procrastinate, but chronic procrastination is most likely a self-sabotaging behavior. Putting off what you need to do, not taking care of the important stuff until there is a crisis. And there are different reasons for procrastination. You're easily distracted, you have poor time management, you're a perfectionist and you're afraid of not doing it perfectly, or your discipline muscle is weak. Also, you may not be good at self-regulation, which means being able to control your emotions. So if you're not good at handling frustration, or you get angry when things don't go your way, or sad when you can't make something happen, these are all examples of lack of self-regulation. Successful people take action in spite of how they are feeling. So they don't let their feelings get in the way of taking actions. Next, comparing yourself to others. It can be depressing and make us feel desperate when we look at others and think, how come I'm not where that person is? What's wrong with me? This can create a huge feeling of futility, or we beat ourselves up. And do you think that's helpful? Do you think that's motivating, beating yourself up? It's hard to be motivated when we're feeling bad about ourselves, and that leads to self-sabotage. That's when we start convincing ourselves that there's something wrong with us because everyone else seems to be able to do what we can't. Check out my podcast episode 357, Compare and Despair. When this becomes a habit, it can be one of the most painful forms of self-sabotage. Next, refusing to ask for help. When people say, I don't need anybody's help, I can do it on my own, this is refusing to ask for help. This is so sneaky because it's self-sabotage disguised as self-reliance. Look, nobody does it on their own. Or how about this? I can't count on anybody. Nobody can do it as good as me. They won't understand what I need. It's too much hassle to ask for help. I need to do it on my own. Or I'll look weak if I ask for help. The truth is, when you ask for help, you're holding yourself accountable to the person that's helping you, and that can be scary and feel vulnerable. Next, picking fights or initiating conflicts with valued partners and loved ones. So, one surefire way to sabotage yourself is to chase away or repel anyone who might support you or encourage you or, again, hold you accountable. This is very common, more than you might think. It's a way to stop your progress by creating conflict so that you stay alone, unsupported, and blocked. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Another self-sabotage behavior is avoiding or withdrawing from others. So instead of picking fights, You can just avoid or withdraw from those who could support you or encourage you. Or after you pick fights and create conflict, you can say, to hell with them. I don't need their help. This is hard to see because if we're focused on shaming and blaming other people, it's hard to look at ourselves and our own motives. The next one is pretty obvious, making excuses or shifting blame. So this sounds like it's their fault that I'm not where I want to be. It's the economy. It's the government, the politicians. It's my spouse. It's my parents, and on and on and on. Making excuses as to why we can't do what we need to do to accomplish what we need to accomplish. This keeps the focus off of us and allows us to not take responsibility. And last but not least, substance abuse, overspending or overdoing it, and other types of self-medication, including overeating. Any type of self-medication keeps us from feeling or looking at those issues that we need to be aware of and overcome. This could also include a lack of attention to your health, so that you can use your lack of energy or illness as reasons to not put in the time and effort. You know how some little kids will make themselves sick to keep themselves from going to school? Well, guess what? Adults do it too. So you want to look out for any instance where you're starting to accomplish something and then all of a sudden you get sick. That could be a psychosomatic illness. So these are the ones you need to look out for. And if you go to tedmoreno.com/blog and you read this podcast as a blog post, there's a self-sabotage quiz you can take to help you see what your patterns are. It's at the Psychology Today website, so you can check that out. There's also a couple of articles that might be helpful to you there on what some people call their show notes. So there's a lot to talk about when it comes to self-sabotage. And the first step is always awareness. You need to know there's a problem before you can address it. So I hope this episode was helpful to you. And of course, if you feel that self-sabotage is holding you back and you're ready to do something about it, you should know that hypnotherapy can be one of the most powerful ways to turn your challenges into possibilities. And the reason for that is using the tool of hypnosis, we can change those associations at the level of the subconscious mind that are holding you back. So I invite you to book a complimentary consultation with me so that we can explore if working together is your best path forward. To request your complimentary consultation, go to tedmoreno.com/contact, and I'll get back to you in 48 hours to have a conversation and we can schedule your first session. Here's a quote by the Buddha, who said, "Your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own unguarded thoughts." So watch those thoughts and guard them. And again, if you want to read this as a blog post, it's at tedmoreno.com/blog. Or if you want to catch this podcast on YouTube, you can go to @TedAMoreno. Thanks so much for listening and take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.